Today, I'm visiting with Tim Morgan with International Sourcing Group. And Tim, you've been involved in a movement to fight the global issue of PPE fraud. And in your efforts in this battle, you've traveled to Vietnam to engage in a recovery effort. I don't think things went that smoothly when you got to Vietnam, it sounds like.
It was a rough ride. So starting at the after the new year, I started to ask if I was able to go over to Vietnam because I really didn't have an understanding of what was going on and how I could proceed to try and get the money back. And so I was in weekly conversations with the embassy, the Vietnamese embassy in Washington, and just very confusing process to get a visa because there was very limited travel for the first half of the year for sure. So finally, in about April, they granted me a visa, and it took about another month to figure out how to follow the steps that they laid out for me. And it required 2 trips to Washington, D.C. to personally deliver material. But I finally was granted a seat on a charter flight from Washington because no commercial flights were flying to Vietnam. And I was told that I would be the only non-Vietnamese person on the plane, which turned out to be true.
All right. Well, this is an interesting story. It's sad to hear the fraud issues that many are going through, and that's we've had recordings and episodes on that. But this one, we're going to talk about your quarantine experience because that word quarantine is normal now with the pandemic, and people, when they travel, they might have to go into quarantine. And I think in some people's minds, it's like, oh, a nice hotel and catch up on Netflix and sit there for a couple of days and move on. Your story goes a little bit deeper into what could happen to someone going into quarantine. Let's look at some pictures and talk our way through this. How's that sound?
That sounds great. Thank you.
Okay, Tim, here's our first set of pictures. I assume we're at an airport. Tell us about these 2 pictures.
This is at Dulles Airport, and they gave us kind of vague instructions to get to the airport 4 hours before the flight. I've never gotten to a flight 4 hours ahead, but I figured I may as well follow the rule. So I got there 4 hours, maybe even a little bit more, because I stayed at a hotel at Dulles Airport, so it was easy to get there early. And I was at the end of the line coming in 4 hours early because obviously everyone else knew that when they said that, they meant it. But the odd thing was Dulles Airport was closed except for this one charter flight. So it was a very surreal feeling being in a ghost town, but then also in a line that I couldn't even see the beginning of.
Now, when was this, Tim?
This would have been in May of this year.
Okay.
So, yeah, so, just got to the airport early, started the check-in process. And one of the interesting things, the long line, I had just taken my COVID test the day before, and I needed to have proof that was going to be emailed to me. And luckily, I was at the end of the long line because my COVID test didn't come in until I was close to check-in. So that worked out well. And
You live on the edge, Tim.
I know. Not normally around airports, but
Yeah.
in this case, I did.
All right. Let's look at our next set of pictures. All right. So you got through the line, and now here we are. Tell us about these.
So from Dulles Airport to Narita, Japan, in Tokyo, we were required to wear a mask the entire time, and that didn't seem unusual at all. So wore the mask on the long flight, which was a little annoying after 12 hours and everything, but it was a smooth enough flight. We get to Japan, and again, Narita Airport, a very large airport, was a ghost town. There were only 3 flights coming in and out of that airport that day. 2 of them were going to Vietnam. There was another charter flight from Houston, I believe, that met in Tokyo, and then we had about a 5-hour layover, and then they figured out which charter flight you were either going to Ho Chi Minh or Hanoi from there. So walking around an empty airport was very, very strange. But before I got on the flight, I see people putting on hazmat suits. And
you knew what was coming.
Yeah, I did not know. I thought they were allowing people to have a choice if they wanted that protection, because there was no instruction given. And I'm over 6 feet tall. The hazmat suits they had were not built for larger guys, so they had to scour the airport, and they finally came up with one for me. And once you put it on, you were told you're not taking it off until you get to your hotel in Vietnam. So that meant we had to fly with it on and a mask. And this was, we landed around 4 a.m. Vietnam time, and it took close to 2 hours for most people to be processed. They processed me near the end because of which hotel I was going to. And when I finally got processed, they informed me that I needed to keep everything on, put up the hood on the hazmat suit, and then get onto basically a Greyhound bus. I was the only person on this Greyhound bus. They were spraying you constantly as you were walking around the airport with disinfectant.
Literally spraying you. They were following you around.
Yeah, they were following us around and spraying us with disinfectant, basically. And we had the booties on too, the hazmat booties. So it made it very slippery on the marble floors as they were spraying it. So yeah, it was just very, very strange. And everyone on the flight had to maintain this the entire time. And it was extremely hot in these suits.
I can't imagine the discomfort of that, but you're a trooper. You did it. I guess you'd had no choice.
You had no choice.
Yeah.
Got to the hotel, and again, I was the only person on the bus, and the hotel was entirely shut down except for quarantine people. So they had taken out all the furniture in the lobby. They had boarded up the check-in desk and everything. And you didn't interact with anyone. You came in and there was paperwork for you on the desk with your name and everything had to be prepaid. And at that point, they told me I could take off the suit, and then they sprayed me down again. And they disposed of the suit and everything.
Now, Tim, you said that you had to prepay, like you had to pay for your hotel. This was all on you?
Yes. And I actually had to have an agent in in Vietnam pay for it for me. I couldn't use a credit card. They required cash. And I think it was to make sure that you had a connection in Vietnam who was going to take care of you, or who was responsible for you.
Okay.
Because my flight, the charter flight, also had to be paid for in Vietnam. So it would have been very difficult without somebody working on your behalf in Vietnam.
Would you say this hotel was a pretty nice hotel in normal times?
I would say it was probably a nice hotel in the 80s. Mm-hmm. It was run down, and clearly they were running it into the ground with the quarantine by just, using it very hard.
Okay.
Again, they had plywood. Yeah, the rooms were okay for a hotel. If it was a normal situation where you're going in and out of your room a lot, it would have been fine. The internet worked well, which was good, but it was a relatively small room.
Okay.
And I kind of assumed before I left, and that was a big problem that I had, that I was making some assumptions, that quarantine would mean you could still walk around on the grounds, go out, get fresh air. It meant that you stayed in your room. I only left that room 3 times in 3 weeks. And the only times I left the room were to go downstairs to get a PCR test. And when they did the test there, they did it as far up the nasal canal as I've ever had a PCR test. It really hurt.
Yes.
But you took your test and then you went right back to your room.
Okay. And to emphasize, 21 days, correct?
It was 21 full days.
3 weeks in this room.
Yeah. And it was down to the hour, because I checked in around 9:30, I believe. And I had been given some paperwork saying that I was cleared to go on whatever day in June. And I called down asking if I could get an early checkout for the 8 a.m. And they said that wouldn't qualify as 21 days. They waited until after I had been there the full 21 days. So I had to check out after 9:30.
Okay. Now, I thought quarantines were shorter than that normally.
They were. And the one in Vietnam was shorter than that the week before I got there. But
Your timing's impeccable.
It even gets worse. But 2 people ahead of me had done a 2-week quarantine. They get out and then they got COVID. So whether they always had it and their tests weren't that accurate, or whether they caught it afterwards, that's when Vietnam moved to the 21-day quarantine.
Okay.
So
now let's talk about the delicacies you enjoyed while you were 21 days in this hotel room.
So they brought breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and bottles of water, basically. And the food was okay. It was 100% Vietnamese. But I found out later that it was catered by Vietnam Airlines. And it did taste like Vietnam. It tasted like economy food on an airline for 21 days. The variety was interesting. The quality just wasn't that great of the food.
Tim, I'm looking at 3 different meals here, and this is breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So breakfast has the can of espresso roast. You had shrimp for breakfast?
Yeah. The noodles was one of the bigger breakfast dishes. And then they'd have some interesting omelet dishes and things. But I did keep track of the meals, and over 21 days, there were very few repeats, which was interesting too. But it also meant that the ones that you liked, you never saw again. So
I bet you were looking forward to some Taco Bell or something.
I have to admit, I had a hamburger as soon as I got out at the hotel I checked in.
Yeah. Now you sent me this picture as well. I find it interesting. This is a sporting event. I don't see this in Columbus, Ohio too often. And you're in Cleveland, so you don't either. Tell us about this.
So one of the stations we had at the hotel was a Japanese station. And when I was flying through Tokyo, we saw that it was the sumo tournament was starting. And so I knew that would be something interesting to watch on a daily basis. So I found online when it was on, and I believe it was like 11 o'clock in the morning in Japanese, but then they replayed it with English announcers at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And, you know, it actually was quite interesting to watch the whole tournament go on. And I picked one of the wrestlers, and I, you know, kind of said he's the guy I'm rooting for no other reason than it was one of the first ones I saw win. Tera no Fuji was his name.
Wow, you learned the language.
He was one of the Ozekis. Well, my first job out of college, I taught English in Japan for 1 year.
Okay.
My Japanese is terrible, but I know some words.
Good. How did your person do?
He came in second.
Second.
So that was a bummer. That was a real bummer when he lost, because it was exciting to watch him go. Yeah. So I kept rooting against the other guy, because if he slipped, then I believe the other guy went undefeated. So it was a pretty clear win.
So we make light of this, Tim. You know, you watch your sumo wrestling, and you had no doubt you said the internet worked good, but passing the time, that must have been a challenge. Just Netflix gets old after a while, doesn't it?
It does. It really does. I did have to create a schedule so that I could kind of be on Vietnamese time, but then also be able to connect with people back in the U.S. Because it was 12 hours away apart.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you also want to make sure that you're sleeping well, and but not sleeping all day either. So yeah, you do have to create a little schedule and you know, create things that you're working towards to finish, so that there's progress as well.
Yeah, I wonder if the sumo wrestler you rooted for that got second place knows he has a fan in Cleveland, Ohio.
You know, I should have gone online and tried to join some Twitter page of his or something like that.
You can still do that.
I can still do that. Yeah.
All right, Tim, let's talk about these pictures.
Well, like I said, the workers at the hotel were quite nice. Mm-hmm. They really did try. Their English was limited, but it was so odd because you didn't see anybody's face for the whole 3 weeks. If somebody came to your room, they were in a full hazmat suit, even to deliver your food. You know, they would knock on the door and you were supposed to give them 10 seconds to leave so that you didn't actually interact with them. The only time that you actually interacted with them was when they took you down for the testing. And as you can see, they kind of made the lobby as bare as possible. And they sprayed disinfectant constantly. I don't know if you can see in the photo, but the elevator probably had a 1/4 inch of disinfectant that made it very slippery to get in and out of the elevator with.
You know, Tim,
as you had to go back and forth.
What they did, you might say, is overkill, but they were being as safe as possible. What was the pandemic doing there? Was it a higher level of infection than in the States?
You know, they had done a very nice job keeping it under wraps. When there was any breakout, they would lock down different quadrants of the city. But when I was there in May and June, the Delta variant was just coming out for the first time. And so during my stay in quarantine, they actually ended up having to lock down the entire city because of the Delta variant. So when I got out, all restaurants were closed, and when I landed, they were all open. So, but I was able to have meetings. Basically, no congregation of more than 10 people were allowed. The hotel that I moved to was quite nice, and it was part of a shopping mall that had a grocery store that was open. And they also had a nice restaurant that you could order from, but it was all to go or room service. Yeah.
Let's talk about food a little bit more. It looks like you finally got something a little different.
Yeah, my the lawyer in Vietnam brought me a care package, and so they were allowed to drop those off, and it was limited what they could bring in, but it was very much appreciated. And at that point, I was shocked at how good a Lay's potato chip tasted. And
You didn't eat just one either.
yeah.
Okay,
And
now
so,
you escaped. You escaped. You must have got out of the hotel. You took this picture.
yeah, so this is when I went to a food court in that mall at that hotel, and it was just kind of funny and disheartening at the same time when the entire food court was shut down because of the new quarantine restrictions. But I was the grocery store that was connected was a really nice grocery store, so I was able to buy interesting stuff and not suffer anymore from and have choice that I was lacking for the first 21 days of quarantine. But I know other people who did quarantine in Hong Kong, where they eventually moved to a 21-day quarantine. And at the start of it, they were giving people ankle bracelets and they could do their quarantine at home and just not leave their homes. But they had some outbreaks because of that. Then they went back to the hotel system, similar to what we had in Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
And then one of the guys we're working with, Bjorn, had the quarantine in Thailand, and I believe he was there for 14 days. So quarantine is tough. This is the last sunset, the night before I left. I felt like I was graduating. Like it felt like there was going to be a graduation ceremony as I walked out the door, but I got out of there as quickly as I could. I had a car waiting, and I was so afraid that the paperwork wasn't going to all line up, because there was quite a bit of paperwork that I needed to check out of the hotel and prove that I did the 21 days. And as soon as they stamped it, I literally ran out of that place as fast as I could. And I actually got to the next hotel, and there was a message from the old hotel. And I was petrified it was going to be you have to come back. But it wasn't. There was, I believe I had a $10 invoice or something like that, that I had to courier over some money to for extra bottles of water that I had ordered during the time. But no, it was very, very hard mentally to keep on track during the quarantine. I was surprised by how hard it was to remain locked into a room like that. And like you said, Netflix gets old very, very fast. So I'm glad I did it, because it was something that I needed to do so I could understand what was going on in Vietnam. And I'm also glad I didn't do a lot of soul searching before I left, because I don't know if I would have. I don't know if I would have actually.
You have family back in Cleveland?
I do. I've got 2 daughters who are in high school and my wife, and so we would do FaceTime, which was helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And so that did break the monotony, and that was always something to look forward to. And I think I learned more about what my girls' day-to-day life was like more when I was in quarantine, because I was able to, they knew how important it was that I got to speak to them, so they would tell me more about what happened in their day, and point by point, and I loved it. So
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing your story. Folks that have never experienced this, like myself, now know that it's maybe something to avoid if you can. So,
yeah, it's
but
tough.
you needed to do it.
You needed to do it. I know
Mhm.
of a lot of people who have had to do it because they had to reunite with family and
Mm.
stuff like that. So
Yeah.
I'm glad it's over, and hopefully all the quarantines around the globe have been coming back down into the 7-day range. I think Thailand's back down to 2 days. Vietnam, I believe, is under 7 days again. So it's the extreme quarantines are over, but they're still there. And I think the way the country has reacted, they will bring them back quickly if need be.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, they do crack a whip over there, it looks like, but it pays off. So you just happen to be there at the wrong time. You should go back now.
I should. I should.
Just kidding,
It
Tim.
probably will in the very near future
Yeah. Well,
as part of this collection effort.
and your stay won't be as long this time. We hope.
God willing.
All right. Talk to you
All
later,
right,
Tim.
thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.